Hey VC, it's Dave here. I thought I'd come on and show some of my latest finds that I found here. This past weekend actually. I went online and saw where somebody had some albums on sale at a estate sale for 50 cents a piece. So I thought I'd go by there and take a look at them. But before that, I went to a concert here, probably the first concert for the year for me. And it was presented by the East Texas Symphony Orchestra, conducted by this gentleman here. His name's Richard Lee. He's a Canadian conductor and is now the conductor of the local symphony here in town. And what they were doing was, at least for this program here, that they change up their programs all the time, but it was a tribute to the Boston Pops Orchestra. And he was a really good conductor. He kept everything light and kind of kept it moving, and and made jokes and stuff like that. So he was really good in that regard. Now I don't know anything about his conducting skills, but I just assume they're very good. But yeah, he made jokes and talked to the children that were up front and everything, and introduced all the songs that they were doing that night really well. And if I remember correctly, I believe he said that the Boston Pops is no more, or maybe they aren't doing it anymore. Now, I may have misunderstood that, but that's what I thought him to say. But generally, he said what the Boston Pops is I mean, it's a symphonic organization, or it's done in a symphony style. But like here's kind of a picture of it. But it's just like it says, it's kind of pop music of the day, but that also includes symphonies and stuff like that. And they did a wide range of music that night, anything from Johann Sebastian Bach to Leonard Bernstein's selection from West Side Story. They did the theme from Game of Thrones and one from Harry Potter's film, and then also did the song "The Typewriter," which, if I'm remembering right, some comedian, maybe it was Jerry Lewis, did a little bit about the typewriter, where they actually use a typewriter. They brought up a typewriter on stage, and the guy actually typed on it and everything. So they did that. They did a really nice selection from Les Miserables, which this lady here sang on it. That's the one that goes, let's see here, how does it go? I know she also did one to West Side Story as well, the song called Tonight. But the one from Les Miserables was I Dream a Dream. But yeah, the whole program was really good. Really enjoyed myself. Here's another picture of them right there. And was a real enjoyable program, so we'll probably be back. Ironically, when I went to that record sale, I ran across this album here. This is from the Boston Pops as well. And as you can see, this is John Williams right here. Here he is on the back. And supposedly, from what the album says on the back, that he succeeded Arthur Fiedler, which I remember seeing some of his albums back in the day. And so he was the first conductor to succeed Arthur Fiedler as the 19th conductor of the Boston Pops in January of 1980. Said he was a piano student of the Juilliard School in New York, and just talks a little bit about John Williams. Of course, I'm sure after John Williams hooked up with Steven Spielberg and started doing, the theme to Jaws and Close Encounters and all that other stuff, which paid a lot better, I imagine he probably just went that route. But yeah, on this album, there's a theme from Superman, of course, the Star Wars themes and stuff like that. And there's a theme to Close Encounters So yeah, I found this for 50 cents at that sale. Now, when I went up there, I saw that there was a sign on the vinyl that said $2 each, so it kind of threw me off a little bit. But I thought even for $2, that's a pretty good deal. If the vinyl's in good shape, that's always the look, the common denominator for me. But I went up and I bought, I think, around 5 albums or so. Took them up to the front and paid out. And the guy, when he rang me up, actually said, "Okay, with your discount, that's 50 cents a piece," which I didn't know there was a discount that day, and I didn't know, any of that. And I thought, wow, okay, well, I'll go put these back in the car and go look again. But any rate, I found a few albums that are pretty interesting. I had this one here. This is Genesis Wind and Wuthering, which is the first second album that they did after Peter Gabriel left the band, but I still think it's a really good album. Now, I have this album here on what's called a definitive DVD, and it sounds really good, but I thought, for 50 cents, I'll just buy the album too, because I always like the album cover on it, and just thought I'd check out the album as well. It's a really good album, even though Peter Gabriel isn't on it. They were still really making great music back then. And some of these I've listened to and others not. I've gone through most of them and also cleaned most of them. The other day we were in a tornado warning and the electricity went out. And so I took that time when the electricity was out just to clean records and, do some stuff that didn't require electricity. But anyway, most of them sound pretty good and look pretty good, but some of the album covers are kind of worn. This is Spanky and Our Gang's Greatest Hits. There's Spanky there that I assume is with one of her children. And they're kind of I'd say they were kind of a sunshine pop band from back in the day, around the 60s, 67, 68, maybe 1970, whatever. But they have all the hallmarks of the sunshine pop sound. Here they are again. These are some of their other albums right there. But Greatest Hits album by them is, suits me just right. It's got Sunday Will Never Be the Same on it, and Lazy Day, Sunday Morning, the theme song from Midnight Cowboy. So, I remember seeing them way back in the day on Ed Sullivan and several of the variety shows way back when. And always liked their music, but just never picked up anything by them. Now, here's a couple of albums that have kind of psychedelic covers, although the music on it isn't psychedelic. I assume they made these covers to maybe appeal to younger people or whatever, but this is Cal Tjader's Along Comes Cal. And like a lot of Cal Tjader's music, it's sort of Latin influenced. There's a little bit of lounge music and tiki jazz in here as well. But it has a hit song on it by the Association called Along Comes Mary, which is probably where they picked up that title from. Round Midnight is also one here, and Our Day Will Come, which was a classic song back in the day. I forget who made that song famous, but this album actually cleaned up rather well and sounds rather good for the date that it came out, which I'm guessing probably is the 60s as well. A lot of these albums look like they came from the 60s. So, pretty interesting album by Cal Tjader. He did a lot of, he's a vibraphonist and did a lot of Latin jazz back in the day, even though he was American born, but has a Scandinavian background. I guess that music of Latin and bossa nova and all that type of thing just kind of appealed to him. But pretty good album, pretty interesting for the going back to that era. Here's another one with a pretty psychedelic looking cover. This is Buddy Rich. The Buddy Rich Big Band, the new one, is what the title of this is. but it's a gatefold, and it's very typical of Buddy Rich back in the day. I first discovered Buddy Rich, probably like a lot of people, off of the Johnny Carson show. Excuse me. That's a picture of him right there with Johnny Carson. And Johnny Carson was a bit of a drummer too, mostly a amateur drummer. But I assume that's where he and Buddy Rich kind of got along together. It was Johnny liked his drumming, and probably looked for him to give him some tips on his own drumming. I bet. So didn't recognize any of the songs on here actually, but this is another one that cleaned up pretty well. And the guitarist on here, his name is Richard Resnikoff. Don't know him, but he you can take here's some of his guitar chops in there, and they're pretty tasty. Typical big band stuff though, actually. So Buddy Rich. You hardly ever see anything about him these days. This is Chad and Jeremy's album of Kings, of Cabbage and Kings, and they kind of came out of the British invasion, kind of as folk singers and kind of pop singers, very much in that Beatle era type thing. And this kind of goes along with that. It's kind of there's elements of pop in this, a little bit of Baroque, and a little bit of influence from Sgt. Pepper's and that type thing, and some, there's some flutes in here that probably the studio musicians added. But this one kind of cleaned up pretty well too, so I was kind of happy with it, even though the album cover isn't in that good a shape. But pretty interesting album by Chad and Jeremy in their later career. Pretty fun to listen to that kind of thing. This is a Keith Jarrett album, along with Jack DeJohnette on percussion. This is on ECM. It's called Rutia and Datia. And on it, Keith Jarrett plays piano, E-piano, organ, and flute. The second song, or one of these songs on here, kind of reminded me of one of the Quicksilver Messenger Services album on, let's see, what is that? Just for Love, on their Just for Love album. And I believe it's called Flute Song. I might be wrong about that, but it has a flute predominantly in it. And the melodies are a little bit similar, but this is a pretty neat little album. Again, it cleaned up pretty well for being, so worn on the album covers. But, and you could tell some of these albums, weren't played that much at all, probably. But all instrumental album. Jack DeJohnette plays, percussion to back up Keith Jarrett here. And it's a pretty good album. I think it's getting ready to rain. I hear the thunder out there. This is one by Kate Wolf, Safe at Anchor. She's a folk singer out of California. Very much kind of, of the era. Sort of fits into maybe, Joni Mitchell, Joan Baez, Judy Collins, all that type of thing. She writes pretty good compositions. She's joined on here by several musicians that, embellish her songs. There's a mandolin, pedal steel, piano, no drums, but I guess she just really didn't feel like she needed them. This is another picture of her. She died rather young. I'm thinking she died back when she was around 35 to 40 and maybe younger. I don't remember. But kind of an unknown folk singer from back in the, 70s or 80s maybe. But pretty good songwriter. Like I said, this is embellished by several other musicians. So, yeah, this came out in 1979 on Kaleidoscope Records. This is one by the Sparks Band. I think it's like their third or fourth album. This one's called Propaganda. And they're two brothers. If you have, I believe I saw the documentary on Amazon, if I'm not mistaken. But it's a really good documentary on these two brothers and their career. And they recorded a bunch of albums. Kind of quirky in a way as far as their songwriting. And maybe they fit into that kind of glam era, you know, of David Bowie and Roxy Music and all that type thing. But this album kind of reminded me a lot of also of 10cc in a lot of ways. You know, they may be a little bit more quirkier in their songwriting. This guy here with the mustache, the brother with the mustache, I forget. One of them's Russell, I can't remember the other guy's name, but plays the keyboards, and the other one sings, this one here. So, yeah, this one's called Propaganda. Sort of interesting album of sort of glam rock is what I'd kind of say it is. But rather interesting in some ways. Found this one too. This was harp music by Nicanor Zabalita. Nicanor Zabalita. He plays harp and is a musician from Spain. This one was sealed, which is the first album I've seen sealed, but as you can see, it was warped kind of the album cover. But then this is a Deutsche Grammophon record as well. So the album cover's a little bit more flimsy than, say, your American domestic release. But there are several composers on here: Albanese, DeFalla, Granados, and Turina. Some, you know, Spanish backgrounds, you know, South American and stuff like that. But pretty good. I mean, it's just all harp music. There's no orchestration or anything like that. And I have several other harp music albums. It's okay, but I've got some other harp albums that I like a lot better, at least just upon a first listening. Then I found these two. This is Jerry Southern, who, along with Johnny Smith, that plays guitar. I assume Jerry Southern was, you know, kind of a jazz singer back in the day. I'm not real familiar with her, but I assume kind of like a torch singer or nightclub singer, something like that. I do have one CD by Johnny Smith, which is really good. He was an excellent guitarist. And on here he plays in a quartet that is backing up her singing. And it's okay, although the album is a little bit rough as far as the noise. But, you know, you can still hear, you know, Johnny Smith's guitar playing in the background. And he really had a smooth style that was really great, you know. So, yeah. But I've listened to CDs so much lately, I almost, you know, I hate to hear any surface noise or anything. But, you know, this is a nice album if you can run into it in a good shape. And last but not least, I found this album by Sean Phillips. Now, I really like his Second Contributions album, which preceded this one. I think this came out like 3 or 4 albums down the road from that one. The name of it is called Bright White. And I wasn't familiar with it at all, but since I like Second Contributions so well, you know, I thought I'd check this one out as well. And I don't like it as much as that other one. They added a lot more orchestra on this. You've got a lot of South California session musicians on here, like Russ Kunkel, Lee Schuyler on bass. You got Danny Kuchmar that plays a guitar on here that help him, you know, do this album. And all that's fine, you know, and everything. I just don't, you know, there's no real standout songs on here for me. I mean, it's okay. Those other musicians played with, you know, James Taylor and Linda Ronstadt and all that type of thing. But, yeah, this one's just, you know, kind of barely okay. But it was interesting to hear nonetheless. But, yeah, this is Sean Phillips' Bright White is the title of it. So there you have it. That's what I picked up recently and what I've been up to. I'm still kind of waiting on the home repairs to be done to my house. Of course, they stopped the leak and all that, but to get the home repairs done, you know, it's kind of like backlogged. And the guy told me, you know, there'd probably be a 3-week wait. So I'm just in a waiting pattern right now, but that's fine. I can wait. So anyway, enjoying spring. Getting a lot of rain here, which is pretty typical for this area. Everything's already budded out and green, so, you know, it's a plus too. So hope everybody's doing well. We'll talk to you later.